It's Divas That Care Radio. Stories, strategies, and ideas to inspire positive change. Welcome to Divas That Care, a network of women committed to making our world a better place for everyone. This is a global movement for women, by women, engaged in a collaborative effort to create a better world for future generations. To find out more about the movement, visit divasthatcare.com after the show. Right now, though, stay tuned for another jolt of inspiration.
Hello to all. Welcome to Divas That Care Network. I am Joyce Benning, and I will be your host for this invigorating, robust lifestyle show. I want to thank each one of our listeners for tuning in today. I am so very grateful for each one of you. And I am just so very excited today to have with me our monthly returning diva, Deb Matlock. And she is going to speak about animal and nature communication. Wow, this makes me excited. I am just overly excited today. So, Deb, could you please introduce yourself to our listeners today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. My name is Deb Matlock, and I live in Colorado. And I have a small business called Wild Rhythms, and I focus on sacred connection to nature and to animals and to the world of spirit. And animal and nature communication is one of my favorite topics and near and dear to my heart, and I think it's a really exciting one to be chatting about, so I really appreciate the opportunity to connect today.
Oh, you're so welcome. I am so excited to have you share about animal and nature communications. And when you said your Wild Rhythms, that just reminds me of your website, The Earth, Animals, and Spirit, and how it all comes together in animal and nature communication. Well, can you explain to our listeners just a little bit on how it is possible to even communicate with nature and the animals?
Yeah, that is a question. I love the answers to that question because the answers to that question are just about as varied as there are people interested in that question. And I think that it kind of goes back a little bit where we have to sort of look at ourselves as, you know, we are beings in this ecological world, and so we are surrounded by all this life, you know, whether it's plants or animals, you know, our dog or the birds in the trees. And we all live together. We all interact together. So whether we're consciously saying, I want to have a communication, I really want to dig in, or we're just sort of moving through our days, you know, we impact each other. We influence each other. You know, you walk into a yard where there's a bird in a tree and the bird sees you, the bird starts to chirp and says, hey, there's somebody in the yard. You know, and you look up, you see the bird, everybody's acknowledging each other. There's a communication. So on the one hand, I think it's one of the most natural things we can do. And on the other hand, it feels so mystical in a way because of the way that we've removed ourselves from the accepting that we communicate with the world around us all the time. It may not be that we sit down and have a cup of tea or talk like you and I are right now, but we're constantly communicating. And so it can happen in a bunch of different ways, which we can chat about some of that here today, but so many different ways, so many different expressions of our connection and our communication.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's a beautiful way to describe it because so many thoughts were coming to my mind because so many times, like even this morning, I had the windows open in the house and I could hear the birds chirping, and they're just so happy and so vibrant on what they're doing out there. And the sun was shining so bright, and it was just beautiful. And last evening there was a beautiful rainbow in the sky, and it was just a half a rainbow, and it was oh my word, it was just beautiful. It was just like it was saying it is a beautiful world, and there is such peace if you just look for it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I just thought that was beautiful. Well, do you feel like the communication kind of comes sometimes through different senses, like maybe through energy vibes, or maybe like hearing the birds, and or even our spiritual senses? How do you feel that we communicate these ways? What are some of the different ways that we feel this communication?
Yeah, I think it can happen a bunch of different ways. I think it can happen when we are least expecting it. We can just sort of feel the energy and turn around, and maybe there's a squirrel sitting on the picnic table behind us kind of staring intently at us, and we just sort of feel that connection. I think it can go where if we're sitting open with our senses open and we're letting ourselves relax and take deep breaths and just with the intention of connecting, whether it's with a tree or our dog, and just letting ourselves be open to what feelings and thoughts and ideas and images we might receive, that's another way. I think people can do it. A common way that we think of is telepathic. If you Google animal communication, 90% of what shows up is going to be telepathic focused, where you're sending pictures or you're sending thoughts and images between two beings. And I think that can be powerful, and I also think that is not the only way. I've met a lot of people who live and work with animals and have deep communications but would never consider it to be telepathic. They would consider it to be, for example, sensory, just aware, physically aware. They might start to feel in their own bodies something, that then they turn and look at maybe a cow that they're with, and they sort of see the cow is stuck, and I got this feeling of being stuck, and I turn and I help the cow move, and now the feeling goes away. So that's an example, but I think what's really exciting about it is that if the first step is it just takes us being open to the possibilities, and then saying, I'm just going to play with this and see what comes up for me.
Right. Oh, yes, definitely. Well, I know even in my own experience, it's almost like I can hear them more than I can see pictures. And sometimes it's pictures, but it's almost like I can see in their eyes what they're saying. So many times my horses will just say, just calm and focus on the moment. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And that's exactly what I need to do, because I'm in such a rushing hurry for everything that we think we need to get done. And it's just like you skip the important things. And that's how I communicate a little more than I would say pictures. So, yeah, I believe there are numerous ways to communicate. How do you feel on communicating kind of in the spiritual, how it fills you with a sense of calming or happiness or things like that? Do you think that's a possible way we communicate also through nature and animals?
I do, and I think when we are open to communication with other beings, one of the things I know it does for me is it allows me to see that the world is not human-centered. And so much of what we are told, in our cultural voices and in the advertisements we see and the expectations of the human world is that it's human-centered. And I think when we allow ourselves to explore the nature and animal communication in whatever way that manifests for us, which we can talk a little bit more like what you said, pictures, some people, sounds, others, it allows us to sort of see that there are a lot of beings on this earth living their own lives for their own intents and purposes, and their views matter too. Even if their lives are shorter or what they're doing is different, it doesn't mean that their views don't matter in the moment, and that I think it does a really nice job of decentering the human at the top of the pyramid kind of image of the human at the top, and instead helps us just put ourselves in the web with the other beings that we're sharing this amazing earth with, and to me that's a huge mystery. Why are we all here together? We might as well communicate. We might as well get to know each other because we're all here together at the same time.
Yes. Oh, yes, because we all live under the same sky, and it's like treating each other equally. Because, some of my best teachings have come from my animals and nature. It's just, they're so truthful. Animals do not lie to you. They just tell you the truth. And I'm like, I love that. I just absolutely love. They are so honest. They're all about integrity. They won't fill you with things that are not true. And that to me is just amazing how they are always, they just love unconditionally and they're always truthful to you. How do you view that with the animals?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there's a lot of, at least in my experiences, there's a lot of ego layers with humans that sometimes we have to sort of wade through that I haven't experienced it the same way with animals. And, it does seem a little bit more heart on the sleeve, honest, cards on the table. Here's how it is. Here's what I'm experiencing. Here's what I want to share with you. And I think sometimes that can be a surprise. And I think sometimes, when we're open to this and we may be questioning, is this for real? Did I really just hear that message or see that message or feel that message? Sometimes it's hard because these are so often such pure messages that I know I've been struck at times by how refreshing that is, because that isn't always the case. Dealing, most people are truly lovely, but, we all have those moments in our lives where we're dealing with stuff that it's like, I don't think I'm getting the straight story here. I don't think I'm, the cards are not on the table right now in this conversation with this person or whatever it is. So we can learn a lot from that. I think that's the other thing, not only what they're sharing with us, but how they share it. I think we could learn a lot from that.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree with that, because humans, one-to-one, each one has all their own issues they're dealing with too, and maybe something is striking them more at that moment, and they're just not quite in the conversation like the way an animal is. An animal is in the moment with where you are at right now, and I love that. That can be so beautiful.
Yeah, and it's such a wisdom, I think, that they carry, because animals are in the moment with where they are at as well. It's generally speaking, it's just such a refreshing wisdom, and it's something that I strive. I certainly don't achieve that 100% in my own life, but I strive for it because it's admirable, I think.
Yes, I do too. I admire that in the animals, and like I said, their honesty. I just love their honesty with you. I can look at my little red healer's eyes, and he is just so honest and pure with me on what he's thinking and how he's feeling. And it's always, they want to, like him, he always wants to please. He needs to know he knows what I'm needing at that moment, and he's there for me. And that's what I just love that. That means so much to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, and I think that's where our relationships can deepen with our animals, when we see them and experience them, and like you just described with your red healer, it allows our connections with them to just go to places that, it's not just, oh, this is my dog, it becomes, this is a soul being that I am sharing my life with.
Yes, he's family. He's my family is what he is to me. Yeah. Totally, my animals are my family. And how do you feel that animals and nature too, how do they enrich our lives when we take the time to appreciate them and realize they are a living soul just like us?
Yeah, what a beautiful question. I think that the levels of enrichment are so many. On the one hand, the animals can remind us to slow down, to pay attention, to be more present like we were just discussing, to notice the beauty around us, to be aware of what's going on around us. And, if we allow ourselves to be open to experimenting, with the possibility of communication, even if we're not sure it's happening for us or whatever, even just saying, this is possible, I'm going to be open to it, I think it expands our souls, and it expands our circle of compassion and empathy and the ability to understand the perspective of others, humans and non-humans. It's like, I think if we can allow ourselves to entertain the idea that there's agency and intrinsic wants and needs and desires in the beings that we live near, it forces us to see the world with a compassionate lens, and perhaps even to really be empathetic and sympathetic, and then perhaps caring and action oriented around it. If people are in love with a tree in their park and the birds in that tree, and then that tree is vandalized, people are going to rise up. I've seen that in my own community. One person carved into this tree, and the community rose up and said, no, we are not having this tree. We're here. We're going to protect this tree. We're going to take care of the damage. We just start to see our community as not just human.
Right. You see, we start to see them more as everything around us is living, and we're all under the same sky. And I just love that. I kind of feel it helps us to go deeper inside and search our own inner souls to find what we're needing to find in our life, to be able to give back to others, be they human or be they non-human, be it in the nature or animal form. How do you feel about that? Do you think it helps us go back in more into our inner souls and search inside of ourselves?
Definitely. In fact, as you're saying that, I'm thinking there's been so many sessions I've done with clients where the session started out with the person having, a question or a concern about one of their companion animals. But then the session morphed into the animal providing advice and sharing some concerns and thoughts about something the person was going through. And so it was such, it's a beautiful synergy, and ending up with the person saying, wow, that is so wise. I do need to dig in. I do need to reflect on this. I'm thinking of one case where the person was concerned about her dog's anxiety, and they had worked with a vet, and they had, done some, behavior, and the dog was still just really stressed. And so we thought, let's go see if we can find out anything. And the dog immediately goes into this whole thing about how much this person was working and how stressed out she was. And she ends up in the phone call going, oh, my gosh, that is so true. I am. And it was really a gift for her and for her dog. And she wrote me back a couple months later. She said, you're not going to believe how much calmer we both are now. I mean, the dog was sharing with her the experience, but then also was really ready to say, hey, you need to back off of that computer thing that you humans think is so great, like we need to. And so it was beautiful, and it did help her to go inside. And I've experienced similar things where that it's like I was probably going to miss that, and I do need to dig in there. I do need to look at this thing. I do want to reflect on whatever it is.
Right. Yes. That answers that so beautiful, because I feel that so much. Even like this morning, just taking the time to hear the birds and look at the beautiful sunrise, because it was kind of foggy here, and it was almost like the sun was burning through the fog to just say, here I am, I'm coming through today, and you'll have sunshine. And I'm like, oh, how beautiful. And then the birds, it was almost like they were coming right in harmony and saying, yes, the sun is coming. Here it is. And if you take the time to just experience that, for me personally, it's such a beautiful, calming feeling on the inside. It's a reassurance of that we're all under the same sky. We all live together. And to me, we can all live in harmony like that, and that's what I think is so beautiful. And I think what you described there too about your waking up, looking at the sunrise, listening to the birds, and kind of being in that space of openness, and that's also, I think, for a lot of us, is a rich place for the possibility of the communication in whatever forms that's going to happen for us. When we slow down and take that pause. And, I think a lot of times appreciating beauty, noticing the world around us is absolutely the first step to potentially having that deeper communication interaction that can potentially, like we just have been talking about, can do so many things for us and how we contribute to the world. Yes. Oh, yes. Well, that, just like you said, taking the time to just experience it. So, like if some of them are saying, well, I'm having a hard time, how do I figure out what steps do I slowly need to start if this is something that I would really like to experience in my life? How would you recommend that they kind of start with baby steps to start experience the animals and nature around them?
Yeah, I was hoping we would get to this for sure. I think this is because there's some fun things we can all go play with and experiment with. But the first thing is we have to say to ourselves, okay, I'm going to be open to the possibility of this. There may be voices in my head. There may be cultural beliefs. There may be, religious beliefs. There may be things inside of me that are really important to me, but that are making me question if this is possible. And I'm not going to ignore those things, but I'm just going to say, I'm open. I'm going to go play. There's no risk here. There's nothing to lose here, And then the next piece is finding a little bit of time to just say, like what we just talked about, just being in appreciation, taking a walk through the neighborhood, and really the first focus is noticing the tree that maybe you've walked by 1,000 times, and this time you're going to stop for a minute and just, you are just a gorgeous tree. Look at your beautiful bark, and you've got so many birds living, whatever it is. So the second piece is just being open and taking that one conscious step of saying, I'm going to notice today when I'm out in the world and in my yard or my garden, whatever. I'm going to notice it differently. I'm going to just pay more attention. And then the next piece is to release expectations, but just, we can talk out loud and just say, wow, I would love if there's anything you want to share, I am here, I am open. Just let ourselves breathe, and then whether we sense it, we hear words, we see images, we get flashes of ideas, or maybe later that day we go to bed and we have a dream about a tree we were talking to that morning. There's being just open to how does our relationship with that tree build, and paying attention to what happens. So if we do open ourselves up and we do feel something or we do hear something, instead of immediately going, oh, yeah, there's no way. There's absolutely no way. The tree just told me that. Just saying, well, maybe there is. Maybe the tree did. And the other thing I really encourage people to do, and I do this still, is to keep a journal. It doesn't have to be elaborate hours a day kind of journal, but just a little logbook of these experiences. Saying things like, this morning I was in my garden and I stuck with my tomato plant, and this is what I think I heard, or this is what I think I saw when I asked this question. Close the journal, go on with life, and what you start to do in that case is create your own memory book, your own set of experiences. The things that you have experienced are really the teachers. They're really where we can focus and we can develop our skills further. We can go to workshops and all that, but at the end of the day, sitting with the tomato plant in the garden and having an experience that might have meaning for you, that's what we don't want to forget. And then going back and kind of flipping through our journal over time, we can go, oh, look at my patterns. This is how this works for me. This is the way that I tend to communicate most naturally.
Oh, wow. Oh, I just love that. That was just beautiful. I love just be open to hear. And I love the journaling, to write down your experiences, because that is something I thought about the other day. I had just thought about that. Why don't I start writing down what I hear from them and what thoughts come into my mind when I'm around my horses or out in nature with the birds and stuff. And yes, you are creating your own memory book. And then you can go back and because I go back in my mind a lot of times and think, oh, that's what they said. Oh, how important that is. But if you have it written down, it's even more meaningful, because then you remember it exactly. Oh, I love that idea. That was beautiful.
Well, and the other thing it allows is as people are getting used to it and starting to try to trust the process and all of that, it allows us to go back to and go, oh my gosh, okay, so the horses said that day, and then we can look in our life and see how that advice actually played out, and it just allows it to. I know that was my process, was I had to build faith in all this stuff for a really long time before I would even share it with anybody, because I had a lot of skeptical voices in my head, and a lot of it was very easy for me to say, oh, I wish that was true, but I'm sure it's not. And it was the experiences over time that made me start going, that there's no way that's not true. I mean, the data is stacking up here. I can't ignore that now. But it took time and me remembering those moments and keeping track of them.
Oh, yes, I can relate so to that, because for so long I thought, oh, did I really hear that, or was that just in my mind, people are going to think I'm crazy if I say that. They're going to say, how can you do that? That's not what they said. And I'm like, oh, but it's not a coincidence because I hear it so often. And I just love that. I mean, I hear it so much from my horses to just relax. It's all going to be okay. Just focus on the moment. And I'm like, it can't always just be my imagination that I hear that from all three of them. I'm like, okay, they're all seeing me in the same light and have the same thought.
You know, and I love what you're saying because it's like I've done presentations on this and so many times people come up to me afterwards and in a quiet little voice pull me off to the side and they want to share stories of their own communication experiences, but they're afraid to share them widely because people don't want to be judged, you know, and so I think the other thing I would say to the listeners is there's a lot of people out there. You know, there's good company, you know, people who are communicating with animals and nature. It is not out in left field. It is very normal.
Yes. Oh, I have learned that over the years, and I just love it because, I mean, it's so vibrant to be able to express that and to feel that feeling through animals and nature. It is just beautiful. I would highly suggest to all of our listeners that are interested in it to really, really do some of these things, to just take the steps, because the feeling it gives your body and your soul, it is incredible. I just love it. It's hard to put into words, really, when you experience it.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think, you know, there's all these voices around us. We live in this multi-voiced world, and so the more we can do to hear those voices and interact with them, the richer everybody's life will become. I deeply believe that with all my heart and soul.
Yes, I deeply believe that too. I totally believe it. I believe it helps us all live in harmony together, and we're all living souls. That's how I feel. And I just feel we all live under the same sky, and I just love that.
Yeah.
Well, Deb, this 30 minutes has just flown by. I truly believe we need to do a sequel to this animal and nature communication, because there is so many things that we just barely touched on that I feel we could go into so much more detail. This was just beautiful.
Oh, I would love to do a sequel. Yeah, I agree. We could talk for hours. So, yeah. It's a date.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great. I agree. It's definitely a date. Well, what are some final tips you would like to leave with our listeners today?
You know, the first tip would just be let yourself, if you're interested and curious, just let yourself go through, you know, a few days saying, what if I could communicate with all the beings around me? What if we could just interact and communicate? Let me play with it. Do I feel silly? Let me just deal with all the stuff that my mind is going to do around that. Mm-hmm. You know, and be open to it. And then the second piece is maybe find some of those moments to go sit outside or sit closely with your dog by the couch and just breathe deeply and just say, I'm open. I'm open. I have no expectations here, but I'm open. And just start to observe what doesn't happen, when it happens. And then just start that little journal process we talked about. Even if it's one bullet point every couple days that gets in there, just start tracking your experiences and your desires around this.
Oh, that was beautiful. Beautiful tips. Oh, thank you so much, Deb. That was great. And we are doing a sequel. We've already said there is a date, and it will happen, listeners. This is awesome. I already made some more notes for the next sequel.
Excellent.
Well, I want to thank you, Deb, and I want to thank all of our listeners for listening to this incredible interview with our amazing diva, Deb Matlock. And be sure to stay tuned each month as Deb Matlock will share her amazing wisdom and knowledge with all of us. And be sure to check out all the hosts and their shows on divasthatcare.com. Remember, have a fantastic day. Be kind to all. Go out in nature and enjoy yourself, and give your animals an extra hug and share your love with them. And until we connect again on Robust Lifestyles, stay strong and healthy.
Thanks for listening. This show was brought to you by Divas That Care. Connect with us on Facebook, on Instagram, and of course on divasthatcare.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss a thing.